published today, I believe, or yesterday, the uniform crime reports, and they show
crime rates are higher. It's almost axiomatic. Crime rates are higher in poorer neighborhoods.
Mr. Schultz, 10% of our people, the Negroes, are producing 85% of our serious crime. Now, don't tell me that there's not a generalization.
I would like to know the percentage of Negroes, the percentage of Negroes, what income level they have, and I'm sure that you would find a direct correlation between them. I wager that you will not find in a middle-class Negro neighborhood these acts.
No, I would wager.
So. I would wager that you will find it higher in those economically deprived Negro areas.
I would have to agree, certainly. And the reason
for
it is
the answer.
The higher type Negroes have gotten out of the ghetto.
Well, the point is, how did they get out of it?
By earning their way, sir, not by shooting people and shooting policemen or raping people. They got out of the area by working. By dint of same way you became the editor of the Daily News. I mean,
the point is, the acts aren't committed because of a person's color.
Well, how do you explain 85% of the crime by 10% of the people? The Poles don't do it, the Italians don't do it, the Japs don't do it.
Because 85% of the people that are inadequate and underprivileged in our society are Negro. Or
you know what,
95%. I'm not condoning any individual act, but the act isn't committed because of color.
I follow your argument.
It's committed because of the background, the lack of culture, the lack of education, the lack of family training.
We've been hearing this for 15 years, and all those 15 years it gets worse and worse and worse. The more power they give the Negroes, the more deadly it gets for the white people. And the sorry thing is, Mr. Carmichael sits there, he doesn't have to say a thing. You two guys are sticking up for what's happening to your people. No, and it's not going to be too long before you're going to be ashamed of it.
I'm just attempting to try to get what you mean by your reasoning and definitions that we understand. I'm sure that anyone would stick up also for you if it was an instance of where someone said that people of your race and your ethnic background were at any time in history the ones committing the most crimes. It wouldn't be because of your color you were committing them, it would be because of some valued circumstance.
It is something, sir. The lowest crime rate in America is in Mississippi, where they got the most barriers against these wild Negroes. The highest crime rates is where you have the least barriers. What you need is the barriers.
This very system supports you, sir.
It doesn't support me. It allows me a little bit.
Of course it allows you. It allows you to talk the way you talk and allows you complete freedom.
No, it doesn't.
It allows you, in fact, at times, I think, almost too much freedom.
It does not allow me complete freedom, sir. What would happen if every time one of my boys were arrested, we had a Nazi riot? Do you know what the penalties were dished out? I have the headlines here. The penalties that were dished out in Cleveland to the rioters, the highest penalty was a $200 fine. Can you imagine what would happen to me if I put on a Nazi riot with guns and shot at policemen? Well, they give me the chair.
If we may,
I don't have freedom
we'll
compared to
stop
these
here
people.
for a brief word and we'll be right back.
Now we return to At Random with your host, John Madigan.
Stokely, Mr. Rockwell raises an interesting point here, and viewers at home perhaps might be perplexed by the same thing. He has just said that Mr. Schultz and I sit here as newsmen and are bothering to explain or refute, and that you are, he thinks, exceptionally quiet in this regard. Is this true?
I think that racism exists within the white community of America, and that the people who have to deal with that are the white people. So I disagree with Mr. Rockwell, obviously. I think that other groups have power in this country. Would you disagree with that?
That other groups?
But you see, you debate here by asking a question 9 times out of 10, and it gives him the opportunity to then respond.
Well, I think Mr. Carmichael is a racist, just like Malcolm X was openly, and I think that his people will support him. I think this is what...
Mr. Carmichael, do you want our support?
Yes, I don't think that Mr. X is a racist. I am... Look, let me explain something. I will tell you, answer your question precisely. Mr. Schultz, black people want decent homes, want decent jobs, want decent way of life, and the right to participate in the decisions that affect their lives.
And I think those are
now,
very
anybody who is
right.
willing to support that, black people will be more than happy to have.
Millions of white people like him have been supporting it, sir.
Just a moment, I'll defend myself here. Don't you agree that with this emphasis on black power, you are almost segregating yourself? You're closing the door to the friends that you may have in the white community?
No, I do not.
Don't you? Isn't it true in the figures of contributions? I've mentioned this before. I understand CORE reportedly is $200,000 in debt.
That is correct.
Now, I don't buy the blasphemy of Mr. Rockwell that this is Jewish support. It isn't at all. The support comes from all segments of our white community. And don't you think that by raising this specter of black power that you may be endangering this support?
Mr. Schultz, black people are powerless. No, they don't have political power. They did not have political power in the South until 1965 with the Voting Rights Act. That means that black power becomes a reality. Power for black people, political power. Now, how the people want to misconstrue that is up to them. It seems to me that the way you move to control your school boards, the way you move to get an economic footing in this country must be through political power and the political patronage that comes from that. Now, it seems to me that's what black people need in this country if they're going to move to do anything at all. And that's black power.
Well, now, how do you reconcile the position of the Muslims?
How do you reconcile?
Well, how do you reconcile with that with your position, this position that you're announcing now as your definition of black power?
What the Muslims are saying is that black people should have economic control, store ownership. I think that that's true. I think that we need, amongst ourselves, some sort of cooperative building so that we can get the profits to build up our community.
But they are advocating complete alienation from the white community.
Okay, I said that the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee have not done that. Now, don't try to pit me against them. We've stated precisely what our program is.
Can I take
now,
a second?
Let me quote from Roy Innes.
The same thing is precisely what you're saying. I mean, would it be fair for me to lump you with Mr. Rockwell and say, well, look what Mr. Rockwell says?
No,
is that what you're for?
I would appreciate very much you're not lumping me with Mr. Rockwell.
Well, then let black people with their different groups articulate their different positions. And don't try and confuse them. Because I don't make the assumption that you support Mr. Rockwell's position.
Well, in last Sunday's New York Times, Roy Innes, and for our viewers, he's the chairman of New York Core, he was quoted as saying, and if I may read this quotation, quote, "When Stokely Carmichael started talking about black power on the Civil Rights March in Mississippi last month, I was caught completely by surprise. Then I realized that the same thing was happening in New York, and New York Core was happening all over the country. Maybe they weren't calling themselves nationalists, but they were thinking much the same way," end quote. How do you feel about this? This is an indication by Mr. Innes, who was an avowed black nationalist, that perhaps this is what they mean when they talk about black power. Now, when you have leaders in your movement who make statements like this is, despite your disclaimers, this is a thing that bothers the rest of the community.
Mr. Rockwell says that sooner or later you're going to think like him. And he says that the liberal people are pushing people into his position.
Mr. Rockwell is absolutely wrong.
But while you're saying I'm wrong, you also said I blasphemed by making a statement that the Jews had been supporting this race-mixing movement and are now dropping it. I have a headline here from the Jews.
Well, I imagine Methodists have supported it,
let me
Roman
finish.
Catholics.
May I finish? I have the Friday, July 15th, 1966 issue of the National Jewish Post and Opinion, published by the Jews, with a headline here, which I'll be glad to show if it can be put on camera. The headline is, "Jews Asked to Drop Civil Rights." There it is right here. Now, how can anybody say that this is not true and it's blasphemous to say what the Jews themselves say?
There certainly must be. I don't know this quotation. I don't know who said it. There must be some people among the Jews, and this is the point I'm making.
Well, again,
this
there's
is
14 million Jews in
right,
the
and I'm
United
making the
States,
point
and
to
a
Mr.
variety of
Carmichael.
Jews.
That's the same point.
I'm making the point.
Well, I can give you the name.
Finish. Just let me finish. I'm making the point to Mr. Carmichael that there must be people in the white community. There must be Methodists and Catholics and Lutherans and Jews who feel a sense of alienation.